I want your attention for just a few minutes. Hear the seconds tick by and question why we're here tonight. It's a party, sure, but there's something more that is firing us and making us reach out to you and you and you to say, please do support our play, because in this day and age we live in now, I am ashamed of how few people know who I mean when I say this show is all about the Radium Girls. Blank faces. Perhaps a vague recollection in the back of your mind of women to whom fate was unkind. A vision of painted lip and glowing brush. No rush to find out who these women were. Their names. Their dreams. But in this play, they take the center stage and bring their rage and hope and fears and lies to our attention. And it's my contention that our comprehension of what they endured should give rise to tension, to voices shouting, no, no more shadows and silence. They now take the floor to show us all what it is to live with courage, dignity, and strength. This is why we're doing this. To open ears and eyes, to stamp out corporate lies, so that when a woman dies simply for doing her job, she is remembered. They are all remembered. So let us introduce Charlotte, Catherine, Frances, Pearl. Each one was once a little girl who skipped and cheered and laughed and dreamed and seemed to have the whole of her life spread out before her, like a picnic rug, resplendent with a feast, and the only beastly thing in her future was choosing, what shall I do? What kind of woman should I become? World War I, and in 1917, a green and glowing paint changes the war. On military dials, on boats and trucks and planes, the Allies make some gains by making them glow in the dark. Pure radium paint to give them eyes to see in the black of war. And on US soil, an opportunity opens up for women to paint those dials, and oh, how they loved it. Described as a happy, jolly lot, they dip their brush from lip to pot, thinning the bristles inside their mouths to make a point, and they anoint themselves with this harmless paint. Like cake frosting, around it went, and they are wealthy, in the top 5% of female wage earners nationally. And they literally shine inside and out, dabbing their brushes on a rosebud pout, because their manager says with a smile, the radium will make them beautiful. And they are dutiful in all they do, and so, for a while, it's true. 1922, and in Ottawa, Illinois, a new dial painting studio opens for business. Alarm clocks, pocket watches, the time flies by, and why, oh why would it not? And this is where Catherine, Charlotte, Frances, Pearl first ply their trade. They are girls, 15, 16, 19 years of age, and oh, to feel the freedom as they're paid. Their own wage packet burning a hole in their pocket, and they sock it to the studio, painting more and more, 200 dials a day, no chore. And they glow in the dark from the paint and the dust, yet the world seems right and fun and just. And the years pass by, and even though across the states, in another small town in New Jersey, the wartime dial painters start to feel their age, and worse, it still doesn't seem like a general curse. Even when some workers pass, buried 6 feet under beneath dry grass, the Illinois women are told not to ask. In fact, the company blatantly lies. In our opinion, they humbly advise the women should shut up and pipe down, otherwise the company might just leave town, and where would all the jobs be then? for men and women. So any threat to rock the boat is choked outright by community fear. And anyway, the people reason, setting conscience clear. The company says it's safe, year after year. And so the women pick up their brushes and pull another dial near. The more they paint, the more they make, the more they ache. Radium, you see, is like calcium in a way. A child drinking a glass of milk or something of that ilk will find the calcium deposits in his bones, making them strong and healthy. And that calcium remains inside his skin, thickening those bones over time. From the inside out, radium is much the same, in that it settles in your bones, your teeth, and once it is beneath your skin, it's in. But where calcium uses that long, long life to make bones quite robust, radium is the opposite. They crumble, dust to dust. A lot of women found their jawbones started to feel sore. It became a bore, the trips to the dentist where the local medics swore they could find nothing wrong. The women would implore, particularly as their teeth started to fall out and the holes they left behind failed to heal. And soon it wasn't just their teeth, but their jawbones splintering inside, leaving holes in their faces, unsightly and wide. And all would get infected, and their heads would swell, and they thought they heard a clanging, ringing bell. Death now. For others, it was in their limbs, a thigh bone that broke without a fall or slip, a weakened arm that once a paintbrush gripped, and even though they rubbed those limbs to stop the constant ache, a doctor signed the order that they must now amputate. These women lost their limbs. They lost their very faces, and then they lost their jobs for giving a bad impression to the company, for taking too many sick days. And in all these ways and more, the women were robbed of health, of life and livelihood, of a future. But what makes this story special? What lifts it above just another tale of corporate greed that disguises itself as a company creed is that these women didn't take it lying down. When the local doctors refused to diagnose, the women chose to look outside their city. They travelled far and wide and finally found a doctor with an honest side. He told it as it was. And it was radium poisoning. They had been poisoned by the paint, poisoned by the company that professed itself a saint. And they didn't stop there. When you're gonna fight back, you fight back with flair. They found a lawyer and they built a case, and even though they had to change the very law itself to get their story heard, they did it. Years of litigation, and every day that passed them by brought them closer to the certain knowledge they would die. Imagine how that felt. Imagine living with the living death they had been dealt. Imagine seeing your friends die in agony, one by one. And even as you grieve, you have to somehow use those feelings to determine no reprieve. We will fight on, we will endure. In all of this, that was the one thing of which they were quite sure. And they did it together. Not alone, not for selfish pursuit. This was a group of friends who would not stay mute. Charlotte, Catherine, Frances, Pearl, they stood up and were counted. for each other, for workers everywhere, because it was right, because it was just, because they had to set it straight, this flagrant breach of trust, because even as they struggled with the horror and the pain, they promised each other that it would not be in vain. And in the end, they won their case. They changed the law, and what is more, they made a difference to the lives of every single person in this room. Boom. And yet, when I first started this speech, who among you would have been able to preach the details of their lives and the difference that they made? And so I say, this is why we're here tonight. To spread the word, to tell their story, to restore them to their rightful glory. Catherine, Charlotte, Frances, Pearl, they were women. They were not just radium girls. They were funny and sweet and scared and brave. They were daughters and mothers, workers and wives. And we will tell their story in these shining lives.